Aaron, I want to welcome you today to the Clemson MBA Business of Innovation podcast.
It's good to be here.
And, I am really excited to talk with you about your career because as I've looked back through the different positions that you've held, it's interesting to me. You've had a pretty amazing journey as far as your work. So first of all, let me just ask you one question I like to ask all my guests is, where were you born and what was your birth order?
So I was born in Goshen, Indiana. Now that is about an hour and a half east of Chicago. So northern Indiana, right on the Michigan-Indiana line. So it's small little town called Goshen. Mm-hmm. And I am the first of four. So I'm the oldest.
Okay.
So, and that was back in 1979. So I've got a few gray hairs, Gail. They're starting to come
in. You're pretty young there. Okay. So tell me a little bit about your current role. It appears to me that there's a little bit of a thread that in everything you've done, you've led organizations in their really production of revenue and sales. Is that kind of what I'm seeing?
Yeah. So I think everybody in their life, has a break in your career. For me, it was when I was 20 years old. And as a 20-year-old, I was given an opportunity to lead an inside sales team at a call center here in Greenville. Mm-hmm. And that really changed the whole trajectory of my career. Because in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a marketing major, had no clue that I was even good at sales. But when you have at 20 years old an opportunity to lead people mm-hmm. and people that are older than you and you're managing them, I found out that I was really good at it because I cared about people. Mm-hmm. But I also found that I had a knack for always trying something new. So it was just always burning within me, like there's a better way to do this. Mm-hmm. And so I just had a knack for it. I found out I was good at it, and looking for ways to improve things. And as a result of that type of thinking, I was able to produce, top quality sales teams that mm-hmm. were, achieving their numbers. I was competitive. And so after 4 or 5 years of doing that, I went into banking for a little while and found out that wasn't really my calling, mm-hmm. But then got into the software business. And I found that over the last 15, 16 years in the software business that is giving a leadership role. Mm-hmm. That's been part of my leadership track is challenging the status quo mm-hmm. and providing alternatives to that. Because I think the companies that fail to do that end up dying at some point or severely regressing. So I kind of always branded myself as an innovator, mm-hmm. As a change agent. You hear those words a lot where I come in and I'm assessing the business and I'm looking for new and better ways to do things that in some cases can dramatically impact the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So, I've been blessed to be a part of those types of roles. And now I manage a team up in the Northeast of 11 states for Wolters Kluwer, and we provide accounting software for CPA mm-hmm. firms. And so I'm always, now that I've been in this role for nearly a year, looking for ways to say, hey, how do we do things different? How do we do things better and innovate? And we've been able to come up with a lot of different things over the last 12 months that are impacting and increasing
Sure.
revenue.
So the last 12 months have been probably pretty challenging, but a good opportunity to find some new ways to approach your customer and make those sales?
Yeah, I find that I fail more than I succeed as an innovator. Mm-hmm. And I think that any good innovator finds that to be true, or any good entrepreneur. And I've just learned to be resilient. I think it's one of the qualities that God's given me that's essential in this type of a role, in this type of thinking. Mm-hmm. I probably will try 50 things and they all go wrong, but I find 1 or 2 things that are home runs. And those are the things that we're looking for. We're looking for those 1 or 2 ideas that change things. I think that I'm just not afraid to fail. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back sometimes is that conservativeness that, I'd rather play it safe. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. There are certain individuals that are just built for that way, and we need those stability, individuals. But for me, I'm that risk taker that's willing to kind of say, hey, let's try this. And if it goes wrong, I have to own it. And sometimes it's ugly. But man, when things go really well, it's really good for the organization.
Give me an example of something you've done in the last 12 to 24 months that might have been a little bit different or a little bit radical and maybe turned out well. And it sounds like you have a group of individuals that you're mm-hmm. leading, and you're obviously trying to create a culture of all of those individuals looking for better ways to do things.
Yeah.
Is there an example you could share?
I have a great example actually back in 2014 that I think is really relevant to this topic. I was the chief revenue officer for a company called PayPro out of Atlanta, Georgia, and a great company. Really loved the owners. Had a great experience there. And in 2014, we really needed to change. Our current sales model of direct selling to the market, to the end users, was not effective. We weren't really achieving our revenue objectives. We needed to make a change. And so I came up with, after kind of whiteboarding and putting my ideas up on a board one day with one of our owners, Mike Steele, like, Mike, I think I've got it. Let's focus on a channel innovation. So let's go out and align ourselves with insurance agencies. We were selling payroll software directly to the end user.
Sure.
Right. So it's a direct sales model. We wanted to add a layer in between there. We wanted to kind of do a wholesale sales model where we have a channel partner that refers us business and gives us their clients. So instead of us calling direct, it's a warm handoff from a channel partner. And then, our closing sales, instead of closing at 10 or 20%, and we're closing at 50, 60, 70%.
That's incredible.
Because we have people that are referring us their clients and we're compensating them with a revenue share. So that was another innovation that we made with that. And he was a little concerned, like, okay, how are we going to go about doing that? And I basically said, let me just, drive in Georgia for 3 or 4 days a week, and let me go out and recruit insurance agencies. That was the channel that we chose. Commercial and health insurance agencies where we don't provide any threat to them. Okay, and that's a channel that our competition can't really go after, because our competition in ADP or Paychex, they already have their own insurance agencies. So they can't really go after insurance agents. So I felt like we had a channel monopoly, if you will.
Brilliant.
And it was an opportunity for us. And I felt like as soon as somebody else figured it out, we might have 2 years to maturity of that innovation. So I told Mike, I said, this doesn't work. Like, you can let me go. I mean, you can fire me for all I care, because I think I have to take a big risk here, because we're really stuck in the clay.
Yeah.
He's like, go for it. We trust you. We'll give you the resources. Tell us what you need to be successful. And they were very supportive. And what we found in 90 days is that we landed contracts with 14 or 15 insurance agencies. And within 4 months, we landed 2 or 3 really nice sales that were all referred to us.
Yeah.
So the innovation is this. This is how it was scaled. Within the next 5 years, we grew into 5 different states, and we had a total of 500 agencies. So we started with 0. We went to 500 agencies. And they each had on average about 3 salespeople that were referring to us. So 1,500 1099 referral sources in the scope of 5 years that all started in a conference room on a whiteboard, tripled the size of our company.
How did you get the idea? How did it come to you?
I was really, there's a book out there called The 10 Types of Innovation. If you start there, right? Yeah. If you're an innovator, you want to look at resources that challenge your mind. And when I looked at that book, and you've got all kinds of different types of innovation, and that's what got my juices thinking as far as a distribution innovation. How can I distribute? Our distribution model to me in sales is really a big thing. And what we found in sales over the years is that companies that continue to go direct to market, you can still do that somewhat effectively, but we're finding that people are really resistant to cold calling and emails and phone. Yeah. So you have to really pivot and find another way to tap into the market. So how can we get to the market in a different way? That book with those types of innovations started me on the journey where I started saying, okay, how do I do a distribution type innovation? How do we do a compensation innovation? Or how do we pay those people? Let's get creative with our compensation model. Yeah. And so we came up with that. How do we keep the competition out of what we're doing? Oh, that kind of fits into this model, right? So the barriers to entry were really heavy. So, most of our competitors aren't going to want, or some of our competitors that didn't have insurance agencies, they didn't really want to spend the money, and pay revenue shares, and we did. So, it cut into our margins a little bit, but it was worth it because we got more referral volume. Eventually what happened is our competition picked up on it, and we were battling other people for our partners, but by then they were under contract. So we really seized the market. So I always tell innovators all the time, you have a choice between being an early adopter or a late adopter. I always prefer to be on the front end of things. If things go bad, yes, it can be ugly for you, but if you really find something that works, you're going to get 1 or 2 years of prosperity.
Yeah. So the partnership that you offered to those insurance companies or brokers, I would imagine they were brokerage houses, then it was a win-win. I mean, why would they say no? You're bringing in something else for them to sell. So it sounds like a wonderful innovation. And how gratifying for you to be able to see the success of that.
I kind of prototyped it and played with it in a previous role with another company I was with here in Greenville for a few years, where I kind of had some channel partners like that, and they were in Atlanta, and we were developing that model, and I'd gotten something from it. So I had done something similar before, but never really had an organized game plan and really developed it out and put everything on the line for that. I really that was a defining moment in my career. It's the staple of my resume to say, I staked everything on it. It paid off. It could have gone very, very wrong, and who knows where I would be today, but it paid off. And so, I think taking calculated risks. I don't ever advocate sometimes with innovators and entrepreneurs taking unnecessary risks or haphazard risks. I think everybody has a different risk tolerance. Do what's best for you. For me, I take calculated risks where I run numbers, I run scenarios, and I say, do I have a high probability of success? I could fail. Yeah. But do I have a better, high probability of success in doing this than something else?
Tell me, how did the Clemson MBA help you grow as an innovator? Because it sounds like that's a part of your DNA that's been there.
A few years ago, I've been in the workforce now at that point for 22 years. And, I'd already had that innovation under my belt and really had a passion to continue to do that. And I think at this point it's like, what new tricks can I learn? As my tenure at PayPro came to a close, I was really looking to see where my career would go next. And an individual that I knew was on the board of the MBA program and suggested that, I'd be a part of that. And after joining the program, I think like a lot of MBA students coming in, I was a little nervous. I hadn't been in school in 20 years, right? And, but getting a taste of the curriculum right out of the gates and learning about ethics and leadership, and it challenged me, and I was surprised because I think, for me, as a lot of people, when you get that work experience, we're feeling pretty good about our skill sets and where we're at. What I realized going through the program is I really didn't know as much as I thought I did. And it was a humbling experience for me and necessary for me to go through that. There were some instructors there that really challenged me to be the best version of myself. So going into the program, I had a lot of talent, I had a lot of ability, I had a lot of success. It really wasn't as good as I could be. So a lot of rough edges. My thinking and the way I thought was changed through the course and the curriculums, through the various types of negotiation classes that we took and leaderships and ethics courses and, law courses and all that coming together, operations and finding bottlenecks and processes and things like that, really challenged my thinking. And when you're out of school for 20 years, going back, sometimes that textbook Socratic method of teaching, which is what Clemson does that I highly advocate, which is a discussion-based cohort environment where you hear from other working professionals and you're like, wow, that's actually a really good idea.
Yes.
And that added more value was the cohort model. And so several of my colleagues I attribute some of my ideas to because they were outside the box and thinking and starting businesses. And I'm like, I like that. Boy, that's really good. And then, just learning to apply that, for what I did for a living. And it just fit hand in hand. And so I honestly don't know what I would be or where I would be without that 2-year stint in the program, so.
I love that you underscored what your cohort brought to the equation because I do see sometimes younger individuals wanting to rush directly into that MBA, and yet you were able to have a lot of success, learn a lot before you came in the door, which gave you, I think, a greater appreciation of what was being studied and a greater ability to be part of that cohort and contribute as well with your own learning. Right. And I do think there's so much wisdom in the room of those classes. I think, I know as working at Clemson, I learn a lot from the people in the room as they share, their goals and aspirations, what they're working on, maybe what hasn't worked. But I always feel like everyone learns from everyone else.
I would agree with that. And I think that the Clemson MBA program is very progressive in its thinking. And the type of instructors that are brought in there, certainly yourself and several others, don't just deal in theory. They deal in real life equation. They deal in real life situations. kudos to Clemson for being that progressive. Now a top 30 program, one of the most cost-effective MBAs you can find. So if budget's something of a concern, you want to go to Clemson to get your MBA. The cohort model to me is the icing on the cake. There are a lot of different MBA formats, that have electives, and there's corporate MBAs, and there's all kinds of different things, and there's some that are all virtual. I found that the in-person dynamic of the cohort really challenges you, and you'll get so much more out of it because the instructors aren't lecturers. They're facilitators. They're moderators. Yes. You find that you're actually teaching each other. You have a textbook. You have a core basic curriculum. You do have materials. Your instructors bring value to the class, but you will find that your discussions with your colleagues and then the cohort really is what you're paying for. And then furthermore, after you graduate, you've got 24 friends for life that you network with and help each other out. So there's a lot of value there as well.
I heard a dean say years ago, what you get an MBA, about 80% of it is really that cohort, that incredible board of people around you that will always be there for you and are always available for conversations. And so I love that you mentioned that. And certainly I want to learn more about even beyond that cohort, what you're doing now and what you're learning now, what's gratifying for you now.
Well, first of all, I want to say that it's been a privilege, and I consider it a privilege to be, on board with Clemson now.
Yes.
So finishing the program and now being offered a role as an instructor in the program.
Awesome.
It's really humbling to me, but I can tell you what, I love that type of thinking. So let's go back to the innovation. So Clemson offers an innovation and entrepreneurship MBA, which is what I took. But they advocate that with the instructors and the staff. So bringing me on is innovative. It's not something that would be normal in the sense that I just graduated and here I am being brought in to teach a course. What I love about that is what I bring to the program is the fact that going through the program, I know where some of those holes are, right? And what we're able to do then is work as a team and plug those holes or adapt or change, what doesn't play well with the students. Being a part of the cohort, the things that you like or didn't like. We didn't get enough breaks, or I really wish we'd touch on this topic more, or this was really boring. And so as an instructor, I'm able to, with these students, say, okay, I've been in that chair. I know how I think this will play with the students. So I maybe need to adapt and pivot. And I hope that this semester, the students that I've had in the class that I've taught, see that to be true, where I have adapted actually, where I started out with a mode of thinking with the class and going through some lecture slides. And then after 2 weeks, it wasn't playing well and I completely changed course and went a different direction. So anyway, that's kind of been a part. I see this being a part of my future. I love teaching. And so being able to give back and to do my best to make the program better and play my part on the team. We have a phenomenal team there. I learn a lot still from my colleagues and you included. So that's definitely part of what I'm doing now.
Tell me about your class.
So I teach a negotiations class. Negotiations, being in sales and sales leadership, it's something I'm very passionate about, which is negotiating. And so having a textbook and teaching these students giving them real life scenarios. So we go through, Harvard simulations and really dive into, letting them pair up and negotiate against each other. And that's how you learn, not just a textbook and dealing in, all right, this is how you should do it in theory, but giving them experience negotiating over different things, moderators using arbiters, mediators in different scenarios. I think that's provided the most value to them in this particular class. And so they seem like they've really developed and come a long way. The feedback that I've gotten is really, really good. And so it's, and I'll perfect it. There's, some things I'll change next semester and modify it a little bit more. But the art of negotiation, and it really is an art in business today, you don't have to be in sales to really learn how to negotiate. Negotiation is a universal thing. It could be when you're going out buying a car, right? So you're retail, you're on OfferUp, you're on Craigslist, whatever it is, you're constantly in a negotiation. How do you do that? Where do ethics and honesty play into that, right? Are you only in it for yourself? Are you in it for a win-win? The types of negotiations, we study those types of things. We train on those types of things. Those are things that people have to predetermine, I think, to be the best version of themselves in a negotiation.
I love that you talk about negotiation and then you bring in the ethics that are involved and being your best version in that scenario. So I'm hearing a lot of character that's important when you're negotiating. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I've always said to each his own. There are different types of negotiators. So I'm not really judgmental or critical. I've negotiated, I probably do it every single day, contract disputes, legal issues. In my current role as a divisional manager for Wolters Kluwer, there's probably not a day I don't negotiate something. It's not just a sales deal, but it could be a dispute. And so you're negotiating a settlement. And so, I've been called names. I've everything in the book. Like there's just different negotiation styles. There are some people that are very what we call distributive, and they're very, very much in it for themselves, and they really care about you and what you get out of it. And their mission is to accomplish their goal at all costs. So learning how to deal with those individuals with a high standard of ethics and morals is my approach. There are some people that feel like it's okay to be deceptive and lie in a negotiation. Okay, that's not for me to judge their style. For me, I find that honesty and transparency and vulnerability provide the best negotiations and really tear down walls, even if it's to my disadvantage. I've always found that even if I lose in a negotiation, I can sleep good at night if I'm conducting myself with integrity and with character, and if that party on the other side of the table trusts me, even if they know they can take advantage of me. But some of the times, too, the strength that I have, I'm not afraid to walk away. So I'm not naive to the point where if I'm being taken advantage of, that I'm like, okay, I get what you're doing. I don't think this makes sense for me, so I'm just going to walk away from that deal. And then all of a sudden they want to come back to the table. So you can still be in corporate America today, an ethical negotiator with a high degree of honesty and be super successful. You don't have to sell out and subscribe to, getting what you want at all costs. Again, where that line is, it's different for everybody in their personal beliefs. But for me, I found that to be true for me.
How do you find that students are responding to your approach in the classroom?
Great question. I think you have a lot of different personalities. So, of course, when I'm in the classroom, I'm always looking, are people checking email while I'm instructing? That means I've lost them or, they're not engaged. So I'm always looking for student engagement, and they all have different personalities. So I try to, have a delivery style that is engaging to their personalities, to them, encouraging participation and so forth. I feel like they're taking to it very, very well. And I feel like as they've gone through the semester, they've all grown and they're learning of it. And I do response checks throughout the semester. Hey, guys, tell me what you don't like. And you can be honest, brutally honest.
Yes.
Like if you just don't like something, like tell me. Don't wait for the surveys that come out at the end of the semester. Like I would really like to know. And they said, we just really love the simulations. It's competitive.
Good.
It's fun. We debrief after each and every one. I give them plenty of time to do it. They're all surprised at the type of deals that all the different groups make. And so like, how did you get to that deal? And so it challenges their thinking a little bit, or, oh, wow, I totally missed that. I wasn't as creative enough. I didn't think outside the box. So that seems to work really well for this course and this class and this negotiations piece. So it's very much, I'm a facilitator, moderator. We have a textbook that's kind of our guide. But we use discussion posts where we want the students to interact throughout the week.
Sure. And
then, of course, I do some quizzes just to, ensure compliance with reading. But outside of that, I think that they're doing phenomenal. They're all scoring well, and I couldn't be more pleased in my first semester.
Wonderful. Congratulations on that first semester. And I love that you mentioned earlier that as a leader, you care about your people and you're willing to always innovate and say, what can we do better? Yeah. And I'm hearing that really showing up in your classroom. You're caring about the students. You want them to be engaged. You want them to be getting what they want, but you're also willing to try new things and keep them interested, pique their interest.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your transition into the classroom is a very natural fit for you.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have two gifts. I'm really weak at a lot of things, Gail, in my life, but two things that God has given me is the ability to lead and administrate and teach. We speak about leadership, and I've seen some of the other episodes on the podcast and been so thrilled with the focus on leadership and what being a leader is. And to me, leader is a lot of things, but one of the things that it defines for me is I like to make the decisions that nobody else wants to make. And so when you think about leadership, there are a lot of times where leaders freeze and they freeze up and they don't, in those critical times, they're not decisive and they're not making a decision, even if it's the wrong decision. I want to make a decision. And so I find that that's what it is, getting in the trenches, building relationships with my students, but also when we look at my full-time role, I pride myself on that the individuals that I have, I know them very well. I care about their families and their success. I'm not really worried about what I can get out of it or my paycheck. That all takes care of itself. To me, it's all about people in business. And that's how I've always marketed myself. When it comes to innovation, it requires people, good people, talented people, but you have to show them you care. And you're not in it for yourself. And I think that comes across very, very easy. I think that's where a lot of leaders mess up, is that they're not authentic, they're not genuine, and people see through you very, very easily.
Yes,
and
they do.
They can see what your true motivations are. For me, I want them to see that I genuinely care about them and their careers and what they're doing, and that I'm not using them as a means to an end to accomplish my innovative objective. And so I think that's really important, is that people equation.
I hear, too, as you're talking, and I think about my leaders from my past as well, so many times I think leadership involves that education of your team, educating them on and supporting them, and really a lot of what you do in the classroom, you're probably doing. I love that you have a portfolio situation now where you're teaching some, but you're still very involved in your career, because I think all of what you're learning still in your business world, you're bringing right into the classroom. So it keeps you fresh. And but I definitely hear the type of leadership that you're describing, where, again, making the hard decisions, but people know that you care, and people love to know that they're cared about. I think it's huge. And I love that that's part of our curriculum. I love that that's what you're bringing to your classroom. I can't help but think about, some Michael Porter philosophies where you annihilate your competitor. And I'm not sure that was the best thing for maybe all of us to learn. So I love that within the MBA program, students are walking away with a good sense of how to negotiate and to be equitable in solutions and fair in their intentions. And that's what I'm hearing that you bring.
Yeah. And like I said, I've had several instructors in the program that I felt like care about me and care about my success. And, and we had lunch together, and I really learned a lot from them. And I felt like they had my interests at heart. And I think that is the foundation of a program like what we teach. It made me want to be a part of the program. And excited to be here, is that type of caring. And even among, my colleagues now, is just, that type of sincerity and care. And so, yes, being in corporate America and having that balance of the classroom, it allows me to stay sharp, obviously bring real life situations into the classroom. So absolutely.
You touched on something earlier about innovation. I want to go back to, you said, I've probably failed way, way more, which is common for innovators, the risk taking. Tell me about a time that you failed and you had to recover.
That's a really good question. There's so many that, where do I start, right? Is that what I just said? I can think of a time in the not too distant past where I interviewed for a role and that I really wanted, and I didn't get it. And it would have been an opportunity to run a national sales team. And it was a good experience for me to go through yet again, because I learned a lot going through that experience. Certainly those opportunities, when you don't get them, they keep you humble and they keep you in check. But I learned how to lose more with grace and humility. And, it's easy sometimes when you don't get that role you interview for, or you fail, to complain and bellyache and, feel sorry for yourself, get down, lose your morale. I found that there's times in my career I've done that. You kind of sulk for a little bit, and you're not in a good place mentally. And I found that this time around, I was able to see myself grow in that area where I was truly, genuinely happy for the individual that got the role. I was able to congratulate them and really pivot mentally and say, it just wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant for me to be in that role. Or, I just simply lost to somebody who was better than I am, and I can accept that. It doesn't mean that I'm happy about it. I was disappointed, but I can accept the outcome. And so I think that was, and it made me better. As I interviewed again in the future, I was sharper, I was better. I don't think I came across as strong and as aggressive. And I learned and got feedback from that interview and found out, what are some of the things that I was missing, and was able to grow from that experience. So I became a better interviewer. But I also learned, when things don't go my way, how to lose. Because everybody, when you're interviewing for a high level role, and it's an internal role, people watch you, how you respond when you don't get the role. Everybody's watching you. Are you going to rub dirt on that other person? Are you, what's that going to look like? Are you going to cry foul? Are you going to be crybaby and complain? And I found for me that, I knew all the eyeballs were on me, and I looked at it as an opportunity to really enhance my reputation, and actually come out of it with something. And that's exactly what happened. And so responding with class and grace and humility was good. So that would be one example that I've thought of as it relates to my career.
That's a great example. And it's also a very inspiring example to everyone, because we always face those situations, and just embracing them for how can we make them be beneficial to us? What can we learn from them? How can we still shine, and be humbled and have grace about it, because that only makes us better in the future. So I love that you shared that. I'm wondering what advice you might have for people who want to be more innovative and creative at work.
Yeah, I think the blueprint is there, and for me, it started with acquiring more education. So if you are in a position to do that, let's start there, right? If you're in a position, whether it's financially or personally, and you may not be, get some additional education. Obviously, we'd love to have you in the Clemson MBA program, but if that's not suitable for you, going back to school, getting an MBA from somewhere that's challenging you and your innovative mindset, I think that's important. First and foremost, if you don't have the resources and you're not in a position to do that in your life, I think you have to put yourself in a position to innovate. And so, for a lot of people, there's two types of innovators. You have some that do it within a corporation, and you're kind of a corporate innovator, and some that like to be entrepreneurs and start their own business. And so, it's either or. There are some people leave their corporate jobs and they go start their business that they had a dream on, and they just go do it. And there's never really a good time to do it, and you never have enough money to do it. You just go and do it. So, but I think definitely, I like to write things down on a whiteboard, and that's a good place to start. If you can't go get additional education, then I just mentioned a book that helped me, which was The 10 Types of Innovation. Start there. You'd be surprised how, no matter where you are in an organization, that your ideas would be embraced. It may not go all the way up to the top, but maybe your ideas change something that your boss is doing. Even it might just affect your team, and it's an innovative new way of doing things. And if you're passionate about that, the best thing to do is just start coming up with ideas. I write my ideas down, and then I start to challenge them. And I also engage others around me to challenge me in those ideas. I always try to sometimes it is my boss. Like I mentioned that example in 2014 where I engaged, the owner of our company to kind of brainstorm, and, we kind of went through some things. So, that's kind of where I start, whether it's material like books, getting formal education, or just something as simple as writing your ideas down, being challenged by some colleagues or friends of yours or family, and maybe it's a business idea you want to start. I find that most, Gail, to be most true is most people have a dream of having a business, of doing something outside of corporate America where they feel hamstrung, where they feel tied down, and they want that freedom to be able to do what they want with their business. And I had the privilege of being in a cohort where, 14 or 15 individuals, did start businesses and had plans to start businesses. And, seeing how that matriculated and that process of going through that, it was highly rewarding. Once you do that and you break free of the corporate America safeguards at times.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
My father gave me a piece of advice when I was 20 years old that I never forgot. And it really transcends into every area of my life. And it's people do what they want to do. Now, when we stop and think about that for a second, it really made things very easy for me as far as reading people. Because at the end of the day, we do what we want to do. So if we want something bad enough, we do it. If we want to go to lunch with somebody bad enough, we do it. If we want to return a text message to somebody that we care about bad enough, we do it. What I find is that we don't realize that we send messages to people subliminally as far as how we prioritize them by our lack of response or lack of energy, by not getting back to them. It served me very well in business because I've learned how to read prospects and buyers really, really well because of that principle. And by that, what I mean is when people are highly engaged in what you're doing, they're very responsive. And if they want something that you have bad enough, they respond to your text messages, they take your phone calls, and you have them engaged.
Right.
Because that's what they want to do. They want your product. Okay. If they don't want it, what I often find is it's not a priority to them, then you don't get that correspondence. You end up chasing people a little bit. You're not really getting that response. And that's very frustrating. I always use the illustration, and I've used it with people before. When you send somebody a text message and you don't hear anything back for 4 or 5 days, what is your initial response? Well, depending on who that person is, it might irritate you a little bit. You might think it takes you 30 seconds to just reply to a text, right? Like, stop what you're doing. Even within 24 hours, that's like a reasonable time to reply. But sometimes it sends a message that, you really don't care enough to reply.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the other person on your side just inadvertently didn't get it. And so you have to have some grace in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that rule of thumb for me, especially in the business world, but even I've noticed it personally, it's changed me and how I respond to people because I want to be responsive. So when my students ask a question, I want to respond fast.
Sure.
Because I want to show them that I want to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and that endears them to me. That it's the same thing in business. When somebody sends me an email and they have a question about something, I'm going to be very responsive. I want to solve problems quickly for them, get them answers back to show them that I want to do it, that I care about them and their well-being. It doesn't always work that way on the reciprocity side, but I think if you understand that it'll help you with people in life in general, that people do what they want to do.
Sure. Interesting advice from your dad.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting what stays with us, isn't it?
It really is. And there's so many more, but that's definitely one that's impacted my career for sure.
Is there a book on you? Is that something you would want to capture for future generations?
As far as writing a book?
Sure.
Yeah. I've thought about actually, did a podcast today with somebody on LinkedIn and mentioned, for me, I would love to write a book one day called Building a Championship Sales Team. I think there's so many parallels between, building winning teams and winning sales teams in sports.
Yeah.
And athletics, and something I'm very passionate about. I just, building championship sales teams as a sales leader comes down a lot to recruiting, like it does in college football, and it comes down to developing talent and coaching. And I spent a lot of time doing those two things in my role in corporate America now for Wolters Kluwer, is recruiting the best talent I can find, those 4- and 5-star players, and then developing that talent. And we've seen that even with our own Clemson football program, that, to be at the top tier, to have championship teams, you really need a good recruiter and a great coach. A lot of teams don't need managers. And I think that's one of the epidemics that we do have today in corporate America is a lot of managers that are just managing numbers and performance. They're not really adding value. Where are the leaders in our workforces today adding value to their reps, their salespeople, or to their employees? And not just beating them over the head with something, really, really caring about them, or saying, hey, let's walk through that deal together, or hey, I'd be happy to be on that call with you and help. How can I help you? What do you think if you did this? Do you think that would help your outcome? Challenging them a little bit mentally, helping them with their personal development. Hey, where do you want to go in your career? Where's 5 years take you?
Yeah.
How can I help you get there? Why don't we try this? To me, that's really what that coach, developer, leader is. And so I think a book about that at some point may be in order to just kind of express from experience some of my thoughts and put that down on paper. It interests me.
I think that's a great idea. I saw that podcast on your LinkedIn profile,
Yes.
so it sounded like an interesting topic. And having a background in sales, I was really curious to know what you all had talked about. So I'll definitely go back and take a look at it. But, sales is important to every organization. So, yeah.
It really is. And I know that not everybody's a salesperson, Gail, and we know that. But, you'd be surprised that, we're always usually selling something, whether it's to friends or family.
Yes.
For those that are starting businesses, they need to have some basic level of sales skills to be able to develop their product, even if they can't afford to hire salespeople. And so those are things that, we want to develop in the Clemson MBA program, those skill sets. And so we have courses in the MBA program that are designed to bring that out. Even if it scares you a little bit, we promise we'll get you to a good place.
I'm so glad that we do. I mean, that definitely needs to be in their arsenal, our entrepreneurial students when they graduate.
I agree.
I apologize for my voice.
That's okay.
So I would like to ask you what you're curious about now. You've got, your teaching, you've got your work. What are you curious about now? What are you reading or looking at?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that, to me, recently I've been just curious about how do I do better what I'm doing with Clemson in the MBA program? How do I continue to develop as an instructor in providing the best content in the negotiation program? And as I go into the summer, I'll reevaluate the spring and, tweak it and make some adjustments for the fall cohort. So I think that's something that I'm definitely looking at. And then I think that in my professional career, I'm really looking at with my team, additional innovations. I just feel like, there's more there to be had. Without going into detail, there's just a few areas where I think we're really weak, and I've got to find a better way to improve it. and to create more consistency with what we're doing in our performance. And so I've got to go back to the drawing board. And so professionally, I'm working through a few of those things right now. And so I would say those are probably the most immediate things, is a couple low-hanging fruit opportunities corporately, and then certainly, continuing to improve as an instructor with Clemson as well in the fall.
You said earlier you made some reference to family,
Yes.
and pivots that you've made through the years. How do you want friends and family to remember you?
Yeah, it's a very important question to ask. And I would say that, first of all, I definitely am very passionate about my faith, and I'm not afraid to say that. That's the number one thing in my life. The second thing is certainly my family. And, I have 3 beautiful children. I've been married for 16 years. And, I think you go through phases in our life. And to me, it's being a devoted father and husband, and being the best one I can possibly be. And along the way, I've learned hard lessons. I've made bad choices. But, my wife's been great. It's been a lot of grace and mercy and love. And, I've been able to learn from those experiences. To my point earlier, I failed more than I succeed. But anyway, I want to be known as first of all, that I was really adamant about my faith and bold in the right way, not intrusive or abrasive, not forcing it down anybody's throat. So that's certainly very important to me. But number 2, that I had integrity and character as a man, and that people could trust me, and that I was authentic. And I've seen a lot of change in my life over the last 10 years. I would say over the last 10 years is where I've really grown the most in my faith and made some changes. And I'm not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes. But at the end of the day, I think that's the thing. Being a good husband, father, a man of faith, and certainly having integrity and character are important to me.
It's a full circle moment for me to get a chance to interview you, because you did come into our program as a student, and then now you have continued to be successful in your work. And then you've come back to teach with us in the MBA. So I really appreciate getting the chance to interview you and see all your progression here. What question should I have asked you, but maybe I didn't?
Yeah, you've asked some really, really good questions. I think a question that is there, what happens what happens to companies that don't innovate?
Sure.
I think that's a really good question for us to stop and think about. I know we often talk about, especially in the classroom, a company like a Blockbuster, who, for those of us that have been around for a while, realize that, they had the monopoly on the market with videos and VHS, and they really weren't willing to adapt. In the early 2000s, when Netflix kind of emerged, and I guess Blockbuster was going to acquire Netflix, and it fell through, and it didn't really happen for them. And now all of a sudden, Blockbuster's no more. You see case studies like that, right? But then you see a company like Netflix who does the at-home video, and then all of a sudden they pivot and they change and they innovate, and now they've got a streaming service. And then you see Disney all of a sudden come out with a streaming service and acquire market share. And now you have HBO Max, and now you have Discovery Plus. Everybody's now doing streaming service, and that all was born from innovation, from Netflix saying, okay, well, instead of sending them to your house, why don't we make it available for you online? And so all of that from innovation. And I think that companies that fail to do that are really going to struggle in the future. And so I've always wanted to be with a company that had that mindset, that of being progressive, being innovative, where I have the freedom to have somewhat autonomy to make decisions or to find ways to do things better. And so I think that's a question that needs to be asked for all of us out there, is, are we in a position to do that? And are we with a company that is progressive in their thinking? So that would be probably the main one that I would say that jumps out to me, that to add to what we were talking about.
And I appreciate that question, and I think it speaks back to the conversation we had earlier about the MBA. One of the things that has really excited me about being with the MBA during my tenure there has been the fact that we've developed different flavors of MBA, different concentrations depending on what our the market needed for business analytics or entrepreneurship or others. So the corporate program now we have a strictly online. We have responded. So I've really been pleased to see our leadership respond to market and different needs and be innovative, what we hopefully are teaching, but also actually be that, from almost a startup MBA a number of years ago So we're excited to be part of that.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I've really watched Greg Pickett do that and challenge the current, start something new. Are we going to fall on our face? Maybe not, but it's been exciting to see that first from a front row seat.
It's an excellent point you say that, Gil, and I think that it brings up another question that I think is interesting. Is what about change? I think sometimes that we all struggle with that at times. Some like it more than others. But, innovation brings change, oftentimes more than not. And so, for me, I embrace change. I love it. But that is me, and I might be in the minority when it comes to that. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that.
They are.
And so that's where innovation generally stops. In a corporation gets stymied by individuals who are really comfortable with the way things are going. And I have learned to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I find that's when I'm in my element, is when I'm uneasy and I've got to figure something out. And if we don't change this thing is going to go in this direction. And I find that when you're in your comfort zone a lot of times and you're not willing to adapt and change to the market, that you or your company, you get stale and you find yourself in a rough situation. And pretty soon you're losing market share. And we could go through just numerous amount of case studies where corporations have done that, where they get really comfortable. They're not developing new products. I think that's another thing, innovating, making their product sets better, thinking outside the box, coming up with new product sets, to reach the market. And I think that change, sometimes that fear of change is what really kind of stymies the thing a little bit.
And I would add to that, I think that happens a lot of times in academia. It just doesn't move as quickly. So watching the kind of change and evolution of the MBA program at Clemson has been very exciting because there has been an ability to embrace change and to continue moving, down that path without an obvious fear, but clearly with embracing, what are the needs out there and how can we respond? So I'm proud that both of us get to work in that environment, since obviously we like the innovative aspect of business.
It's funny because you see it with students that they're growing, and that is uncomfortable a lot of times, for the students. And I remember being that place as well, where there was times where I was uncomfortable in my chair, thinking, what, I've got to figure this out, and I don't like being forced to grow sometimes, and that's a good thing. It was healthy for me, and that's really what the program is designed to do.
Yeah.
And but also, like you say, personal development. What types of books are you reading? I have my class reading, 4 or 5 different negotiation books right now that they're going to report on next week. And, and to me, that's important, getting different perspectives from different authors, especially in a business setting, trying to figure out different ways of doing things to get your mind going and stimulated. I think that's where innovation has to start.
Yeah.
And starting with that piece of paper, that napkin. I've seen some great ideas start on a napkin at a coffee shop.
Sure.
And then it develops and you start thinking through it. It could be on the whiteboard. It can be while you're thinking in your car, but to get those juices flowing a little bit, those innovative juices, you need to, put information in your mind that'll challenge your way of thinking, get you out of the status quo.
Yes.
To me, the enemy of innovation is the status quo. It's where we don't want to be. It works for a while, but we're constantly trying to find new ways of doing things. So that's my focus. And, I think that's what I'm still the most curious about, is how I can be a better innovator and take it to another level, in my career.
Well, thank you so much for the time that you spent with me today.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad we were able to capture this, and I'm going to be excited to talk with you more about your class in the future.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.